This is Jennifer Gonzalez welcoming you to episode 159 of the Cult of Pedagogy podcast. In this episode, we're going to talk about breakout rooms, games, and other ways to connect students remotely. Even before 2020, building relationships between students was an important ingredient in making school great. When students feel socially comfortable in a classroom, when they feel like they're among friends, when they feel known and seen, when they trust the people around them, they're more willing to take academic risks, ask questions, and even attend class. Creating this kind of environment in your classroom isn't really difficult, but it does require a conscious effort. While some relationships might grow organically no matter what you do, many more will develop if you take deliberate steps to make them happen. Right now, while we're still in the middle of a pandemic, that principle is even more true. Across the world, social isolation is causing more people to experience depression and anxiety, and that's as true for students as it is for everyone else. Setting aside time for social interaction is not just a nice to do. It really is essential. And I fear that in too many places it's getting overlooked. From a personal standpoint, I've seen my own kids who are in middle and high school beg to stay home from their twice a week in-person school days. They talk about the drudgery of sitting still all day, the feeling of not knowing anyone in any of their classes, and the anxiety around speaking up or getting things wrong in front of peers, all of which indicate a lack of interactivity, not enough time being spent on relationship building between students. This isn't a surprise. Like so many other districts, ours has done its best to adjust to constantly changing circumstances, and everyone from the superintendent to building principals to classroom teachers has been incredibly flexible, compassionate, and willing to do just about anything to make this school year work. But they all have a million things on their plates. Making the tech work, getting through the curriculum, keeping everyone, including themselves, safe. It's not a huge surprise that socializing isn't at the top of the list. What I have to offer today is not grounded in any kind of formal research. It is just a list of ideas for generating more high-quality social interactions between students, whether they're remote or socially distanced in person. I got most of this from your responses to a couple of tweets that I sent out. And if you go over to Cult of Pedagogy, click on episode 159 in the podcast page, there are links to the tweets. There was actually 3. And so I pulled some really good ideas from there. There were so many that I had to just stop. So if you want to see all the ideas that people shared, then go over and find those links. So today we're going to talk about breakout rooms, other collaborative tools, how to improve participation in a whole class Zoom meeting, and some other stuff that's just for fun. Whatever we do, now more than ever, it's crucial that we do something to get our students talking to each other. Before we start, I'd like to thank National Geographic Education for sponsoring this episode. During a school year like no other, National Geographic Education is here to offer support with a space to connect, learn, share, and celebrate successes along the way. We invite you to explore National Geographic Education's free tools and resources to engage and inspire K-12 students wherever they're learning, virtually, in person, or a hybrid of the two. Join the community and the conversation with other educators across all our social platforms, including Twitter and Facebook, at @NatGeoEducation. Plus, explore all of the free resources by visiting natgeoed.org/learnanywhere. Support also comes from ListenWise, an award-winning online listening curriculum. ListenWise brings NPR podcast lessons into your classroom for grades 2 through 12. Teach listening skills while building content knowledge using engaging and relevant nonfiction podcasts. ListenWise is great for addressing the listening and speaking standards on your ELA state assessments, like the Smarter Balance test. And with ListenWise Premium, you get built-in literacy supports, automatically scored listening comprehension quizzes, and interactive transcripts so students can read along as they listen. Research shows that better listeners are better learners. Sign up for a 30-day free trial at listenwise.com/cultofpedagogy. Finally, I would like to take a minute to tell you about my new online mini course, 4 Laws of Learning and How to Obey Them. In education, new ideas, tools, and strategies are coming at you all the time. On top of that, changing circumstances compel you to make adjustments to the way you normally do things. With all of this spinning around you, it can be hard to find a clear path. What you need is a compass, a set of principles you can return to again and again when you start to feel like you're losing your way. This mini course is that compass, a set of 4 laws for planning instruction, just instruction. Yes, many other factors influence the quality of a student's education, but when it comes to instructional planning, what you do in that 45 to 90-minute block of time that's set aside for actual pedagogy, following these principles produces the most powerful learning. In just about 2 hours, this short course teaches you the laws through videos, guided notes, and quick module quizzes to check your understanding. To learn more about the course, visit cultofpedagogy.com/laws and use the code LISTENER at checkout to take $5 off the course tuition. That's cultofpedagogy.com/laws. Now let's talk about some ways to connect our students in this crazy, disconnected time. First, we're going to talk about students that are in person but socially distanced, and then we'll get to the remote learners. In conversations about wanting kids to get back to in-person schooling, social benefits are often high on the list of reasons. But I suspect that safety protocols, masks, and social distancing have paralyzed a lot of teachers when it comes to making those social interactions happen. While it's obviously harder to enjoy the hands-on projects, games, and collaborative activities you did before the pandemic, I believe teachers are creative enough to figure out workarounds. And anything is better than nothing at all. So instead of throwing in the towel, challenge yourself. Challenge your colleagues, challenge your students to invent ways to do the things you used to do, but safely. For example, can you play Team Pictionary with whiteboards 6 feet apart? Probably. Can students interview each other through masks and report to the class about what they learned? Yes. Is there a way to replace physical movement in certain games with digital movement so that in-person students can interact with their voices but move in a virtual space and stay safely spaced out? Yes. Earlier this year, I offered my own workaround for this. I called it the Avatar Classroom, and I made a video that shows how it works. But for you that's listening, because there's a link to the video over on the website, the idea is basically that you give each student sort of a block or a shape on something like a Google slide that represents who they are. And then that slide represents the classroom. And then you say something to them, whether it's on Zoom or even in the physical classroom, about where they might move for something like an icebreaker activity. And they all go into the slide and move their own names the way that they would move their bodies in that classroom. If you see the demo, it makes more sense, but it is a workaround. It's obviously not as good as being able to move around physically, but it's something. Can you have a whole class discussion at a physical distance? Absolutely. Many of the structures in my big list of class discussion strategies, which is episode 28 of this podcast, can be done spaced out in masks. No, it won't be exactly the same. And not being able to see the bottom half of anyone's face limits our ability to communicate. But again, something is better than nothing. So those are just some general tips for in-person. Next, we're going to talk about breakout rooms, which I sent out a separate tweet about breakout rooms only, and that one got probably the strongest response. It got the most responses. So for that one, I definitely had to stop after a while, but I noticed a lot of repeat ideas. And so that really helped me to put together a good list of tips that seem to be coming up a lot from a lot of teachers. So in case you don't know what breakout rooms are, these are things that you can do in a video conferencing platform like Zoom and Google Meet, where you can put the participants from the main room into smaller rooms called breakout rooms so that they can have small group discussions. Just sending students into these rooms doesn't usually get you good results. So here are some of the things that you can do to make those rooms work better. And I've got actually broken these tips into separate categories. So the first one has to do with roles. One of the most frequently mentioned tips was to assign roles to students. At the bare minimum, designate a group leader so that that person can start the discussion and keep everyone on task. Doing this will prevent students from just going into the rooms and waiting for someone to start. The other roles that you could assign if you wanted to do multiple roles would be like a timekeeper, someone to keep track of how long they have, someone to share their screen with the others in the group so that everyone can be looking at a shared document or some other online project, and then someone else who would be reporting the group's findings after everyone returns to the larger meeting room. Also on the same topic of roles, several teachers mentioned that students actually prefer to have the teacher assign the roles rather than having the students do it. Something else to consider. Also, clarify what the roles actually mean ahead of time, because different students may have different ideas for what they're supposed to do. So be just clear about what the roles actually mean and take some time to explain them. One other thing about roles, and this was suggested by one teacher, she adds an icebreaker element to role assignment by saying something like this. You're going to go into breakout rooms. The student with the smallest shoe size will be the group leader today. Doing this sets up a really quick, fun conversation to start off the breakout session. It doesn't take too much time, but it's helping the group members get to know each other really briefly. So that was roles in breakout rooms. The next part of the breakout rooms tips has to do with grouping. The ideal size of a group, based on teacher recommendations, seems to be from 2 to 5 participants, and really the most frequent was mentioned was either 3 or 4. In general, smaller groups work better, but you also have to consider your own ability as a teacher to pop in and out of groups. So if you create too many small groups, you may not be able to actually get to them all often enough. In my notes, I am also linking to an interview, and I did not check how to pronounce this guy's name, Peter Lildhall. This is a separate podcast, the Making Math Moments Matter podcast. It's an interview where he really digs into the difference between ideal group sizes virtually versus ideal group sizes in person. And he makes a case for going a little bit larger virtually. So if you want to listen to that, I've provided a link to that too. Another thing on grouping. Once the groups are formed and seem to be working well, several teachers reported that it is best to keep the grouping the same for an extended period of time because the comfort and familiarity of working with the same people tended to get the kids to engage more fully. Also, consider getting student input on group formation. If it's possible to put students with people they want to work with, things tend to go more smoothly. And finally, when groups are first forming, give them a few icebreaker questions or another fun activity before getting into the academics to help participants get to know each other. Okay, so another subtopic within the breakout rooms category is just on some tech-specific tips. Before releasing students into the breakout rooms, have everyone turn on their cameras and unmute their microphones so that once they go into the breakout rooms, there's no delay. A lot of times when we run these Zoom or Google Meet large rooms, we'll have everyone muted. So you want to undo that before sending them, and then there's not going to be a lot of wasted time telling everybody to turn their mics on. Several teachers mentioned using 2 devices for breakout rooms. One to use as they move into the breakout rooms, and then they have another device that is monitoring the main meeting room. So that could be something else you might want to try if that sounds like it would work for you. And then if your video conferencing tool has some kind of an ask for help button or other features that will allow them to get your attention, make sure that you've actually reviewed how to use that and what will happen when they do. So still have kind of a lot more for breakout rooms because that's where I got the most tips. This section is just called the tasks. In other words, what you give them to do once they go into the breakout rooms. Breakout rooms work much better if the instructions for students are specific and clear, even with a rubric if possible. Also, make sure students have access to the instructions once they're inside the breakout rooms. And I think this happens a lot. You give them instructions in the larger room, they go off to their own private rooms, and then all of a sudden it's like, wait, what are we supposed to do? So make sure that there is some system for them to have access to those instructions. Groups are also usually more successful if students are expected to return to the larger group with some sort of a response or product to share with the larger class. So giving them something that they have to produce in the time that they have will keep them on task. Having some kind of collaborative project was the most frequently mentioned tip for breakout rooms. This can be a shared Google Doc, and several teachers recommended having each student type in a different color so that you can see who contributed what. It could be a Google slide or slides presentation. It could be a Padlet. It could be a Canva design. Really, the possibilities are endless, but there seemed to be a certain magic in the combination of going into a breakout room and then using some other kind of tech to collaborate on something so that they're talking on video, but one student is sharing a screen and they're all talking about this thing that they're working on together. And then finally, just like in the classroom physically, any assignment will get better engagement if the task actually matters to students. So if you're not getting the response you want, relevance may be the root of the problem. So we're still in breakout rooms. We've got two more topics of tips. One has to do with monitoring the groups. When students are first getting used to breakout rooms, if you can, try to get one or more other adults or teachers to help you monitor and visit the rooms. This is just going to allow you to cover more rooms and give students the support they need. And then, of course, you can scale back once they seem to be getting better at it. Also, let students know how you will be monitoring and communicating feedback to the group so that they know where to watch and how maybe they might respond if they get the feedback from you. Also, many teachers don't always go into every room to visit during breakouts, but instead they monitor the work as it's being done in some sort of a file. And probably the best idea that I saw that I thought was really pretty brilliant, one teacher creates a single Google Slides presentation, so many slides, but just one presentation, and assigns a different slide to each group for recording their work. Doing this allows the teacher to just scroll through the one slide presentation to monitor work in all groups at once, because as they're making the changes, they're going to populate right there on that file. Instead of flipping between tabs or opening up different Google slide presentations to check on how they're doing. I thought this was pretty genius. And the person even said that if you go into the view menu and choose grid view, you can actually see thumbnails of all the slides at once. And that'll give you kind of a bird's eye view of activity. Obviously, you're not going to be able to see probably the words that they're writing, but you'll be able to see where there's sort of movement and activity in different slides. And if you see one that is just sitting there still with nothing happening, that might be the group you have to go into. There are other tools that do similar things. There's ClassKick. There is Formative, which a lot of people call Go Formative because that's their URL, and Pear Deck. And all of these let you see more than one screen of student work at a time. But I just thought that Google Slides hack was pretty cool. Okay, so finally, just some general tips for breakout rooms, and then we're going to move away from breakout rooms. Model the desired behaviors and practices that you want to see in the breakout rooms. one group of teachers actually conducted their own mock Zoom session and recorded it on video to demonstrate these protocols, and then they made that available for students to watch. Most teachers have found that it helps a lot to set time limits for breakout rooms. A lot of them said keep it short, especially at first. Once students gain more experience, then they can build their stamina to longer lengths of time. But a lot of teachers said set a time limit and keep it pretty short at first. It's not necessary to have every single breakout group report back when everyone comes back to the main room every time. It is okay to randomly pick a few groups to share, and then you can get to other groups the next time around. And then finally, this was one more idea about how to use breakout rooms that a lot of people seem to respond to really well. When students are doing individual quiet work, you can also use breakout rooms to put each student into their own breakout room and then circulate one room at a time to have one-on-one conferences. Writing teachers in particular really, really liked this strategy. So that is all the stuff about breakout rooms. I almost did this entire podcast just on breakout rooms, but I thought, let me throw the other interactive stuff in too. So the next thing we're going to move to is just about the whole group video conferencing. So this is not the breakout part, but this is when everyone is in the same room. I've heard a lot of teachers talk about, not being able to get kids to participate or talk very much. And students, I think, are generally going to be more shy in a video conference. Usually, as the number of faces in the room goes up, the less willing most people are to speak. And this is not that different from a physical classroom on the first few days of school, where students don't all know each other, the culture hasn't been well established, no one is quite sure what the rules are, what happens when you break them, so on. So if the school year is well underway, but you're still getting low participation in whole class video meetings, a few tweaks to your approach might help. Now, I covered this topic a while back in episode 128, and it was called When You Get Nothing But Crickets. And it was all about trying to get discussion going in your class and just not getting a lot of response. But a lot of the advice in that post translates pretty well to virtual environments. So I'm just going to give you a quick summary of the most relevant tips from that episode. First is to specify the type of response you want. Sometimes students freeze up because they're not sure what you're looking for and they don't want to be wrong. They will be more willing to participate when they know the kind of answer you want. So, for example, you could say, in a minute, I'm going to ask a question. What I want you to do first is think quietly about your answer, and then I'm going to ask for 3 volunteers to share their answer with the group. Then it's very clear what's going to happen next. In virtual settings, it's also essential that you have established clear protocols for how to respond. Should they just unmute themselves and start talking? Should they use a hand-raising protocol? Should they type something in the chat first? Without these clear protocols, most students are going to default to doing nothing because they just don't want to embarrass themselves. Another thing you can do to increase participation is to ask for a show of hands first about a particular question. So instead of just throwing out a question to the general group and hoping someone volunteers to answer, make a little shift by asking something that everyone can respond to with a show of hands and then call on one person to elaborate. So rather than say, how was everyone's weekend? And just sort of waiting for the crickets to subside, you could just change it a bit to say, how many people watched a sporting event this weekend? And then you see the hands go up, and then you can call on 2 or 3 people who have their hands raised and say, well, what was it? And then you have a conversation going. Another way to increase participation in the whole class setting is to ask individual students direct questions. So again, when you ask a general question to the whole group, most students aren't going to have the confidence to just volunteer a spontaneous answer. But when you call on individuals to share their thoughts on specific questions, you immediately lower the risk and make it safer to talk. And finally, give processing time. When a question is asked and silence follows, it's hard to know whether that grid of faces on your screen are confused, thinking, or just shy. But one thing that's certain is that many people need a bit of time to think before responding to a question. So just build that in. When you ask a question, tell students you're going to give them 30 seconds to think about their answer, then you'll call on someone. Even better, have them write down a response. Then everyone will have something to share when the time is up. So one more thing about the whole class discussions, and this is just kind of, I don't know, like a disclaimer. It's about behavior. I've been hearing more lately about behavior issues in video conferencing sessions, especially in the elementary grades. And I'm imagining elementary teachers rolling their eyes as I'm talking about how hard it is to get kids to talk. Because maybe if you've got a really high energy class, you're thinking, no, I have the opposite problem. But I get the impression that some teachers are spending an awful lot of time correcting student behavior and punishing students for things like not looking at the camera or doing distracting things, particularly at the elementary level. To me, this feels like a terrible use of whole class time. But I don't have a lot of answers to this problem yet. So I would just like to put the request out that if you have found good solutions to this specific problem, please come over to Cult of Pedagogy, click podcast, go to episode 159, and go to the comment section for that post and share your ideas, because that's its own separate topic, and I just haven't had bandwidth yet to deal with that. So that's just a little request on that one. Okay, so quick review on what we've talked about so far. We're talking about ways of getting kids to just interact more. We've talked about a couple of, strategies for doing it in person and trying to replicate what we used to do, but safely. Whole long thing about breakout rooms and making them work better. And breakout rooms in general are meant to be interactive. A couple ideas for increasing your participation in whole group video conferencing. And I'm going to talk about two more things. One is collaboration and discussion apps. So apart from your video conferencing apps, there are quite a few platforms that offer tools and spaces where students can conduct robust conversations, academic or otherwise. Now, most of these are written conversations. So these are like the discussion boards of yore. Back when a lot of us were like in college or whatever, you would just do sort of written discussion boards. But there can be a lot of good interactivity there where students can get to know each other and just be a little bit more social. So some of these tools, I've broken them into three categories: group messaging, project management, and discussion. So the group messaging ones, Microsoft Teams has probably done the most to make themselves a user-friendly space for schools. Microsoft Teams allows teachers to set up a controlled environment where students can send individual or group messages and create topic-specific subgroups for more focused conversations. Other tools, Slack, Discord, which is extremely popular right now, they both offer similar spaces, but neither one has done as much as Microsoft Teams to sort of set up structures specifically for like safe student use. I keep hearing a lot about Discord, and I almost want to recommend it, but I'm not seeing enough there yet that's making it sort of compliant with all the laws associated with school-based tools yet. But that your students are probably going to want you to be setting up a Discord group. Voxer is another one. I feel like I've mentioned Voxer 15 times for as long as I've had this podcast, but it is still one of my favorite tools for asynchronous voice communication. And you can get on there, leave a voice message, and then the person you're talking to can leave one back, and it just goes back and forth. You're not going in and pressing 2 or anything like that. It's just all in one long sequence. And multiple people can be in the same voice conversation. So it would be another way to give kids a chance to really talk and connect with each other without it having to be a live video chat. Another set of apps are project management apps. The ones I'm going to mention here are Trello, Kanbanshi, and Basecamp. All of them give users a place to really manage a large project. They can assign tasks, plan timelines, discuss ideas, keep track of important documents. I'm a big fan of these tools for preparing kids for work after school, and also just for the kind of work we would like to see students doing, stuff that's more complex, possibly more relevant to the real world and maybe their communities, and that have a lot of moving parts and require collaboration and organization all at once. And then the other set of apps are just general discussion apps. The two that I think are great are Kialo and Parlay. Again, I've got links to all of these over on the post. Both of them offer really wonderful frameworks for written discussions, and they provide libraries of really, really good, rich topics for discussion and debate. So the last category of ways we can get kids interacting more, I have just called it plain old fun. Laughter is one of the best ways to relieve stress and build community. And has there ever been a time when we needed both of those things more than now? So setting aside time for students to just have fun together is a very good use of time. Here are some suggestions. Games. Any kind of icebreaker can be played at any time to give students a chance to get to know each other better. You can play 2 truths and a lie. You can do short peer interviews. I've got 3 favorite icebreakers that I've been talking about forever, and I've put a link to those too. Anything. And you don't have to play a long game. You could just start every class with 1 icebreaker question. Some schools are setting aside times for students to play social interactive games that are very popular right now. The ones that I've listed here are Among Us, Minecraft, and Roblox. These are all games where multiple players can get on. They can be playing in the same game, but then they can also be talking to each other. Some of them right through the app and others just in the room with each other. So this is another way just to sort of play together. And then games like Kahoot, quizzes, Gimkit, those are all things that a lot of us have used for academic content, but they can also be played with non-academic topics as well. And you can have students work in pairs to write questions for games to play as a class. Just little trivia questions, just questions for fun, that sort of thing. Just, again, something for fun. Another thing I have listed in the fun category are virtual lunch and recess. Some schools are setting aside time for students to have lunch or, quote, recess in less structured video conferencing rooms where they can just chat. Even if only a few students take advantage of this, if they do so regularly, it can provide incredibly important social opportunities where there might otherwise be none. So I would not write this off if you think it's not that popular, because honestly, if 3 kids come to your virtual lunch every day, that's a really important opportunity for them. Another just for fun thing is performances. I had one teacher in the Twitter feed who had her students just perform a play in a video conferencing session, and she said they loved it. So I hadn't even thought about that, but that sounds fun. Special events. So these are Zoom or Google Meet sessions scheduled for non-academic activities like cooking demonstrations, pet play dates, craft hours. These are just things where participants are sort of busy with something at home, but they're hanging out together simultaneously on camera and just chatting about what they're doing. This sounds great, and it's optional, and it's aside from the regular class times. It's just an opportunity to hang out with people. And then one other suggestion before I wrap up is video postcards. Pre-recorded video can go a long way toward helping students feel more connected to each other. Dave Stewart Jr. actually shared this idea with me of sending students weekly video postcards, super short videos like 1 to 2 minutes of him at home, just taken on his phone, walking around his house, making food in his yard with a pet, running errands, whatever. He's just sharing a quick thought with 0 academic strings attached. It was just really to say hi and give them a snippet of his life. So you can have the students do these too. A really efficient way with a whole class would be to offer a weekly Flipgrid prompt with a single question like, what is the weirdest thing you ate this past week? And just allow students to participate if they want. So that is my list. That's it for now. I hope you have found at least one idea that you're going to try in the next week or so. Not only will the extra socializing make your regular academic stuff go better, it is just something we all need more of right now. Your students, yes, but also you. For links to all the resources mentioned in this episode, visit cultofpedagogy.com, click podcast, and choose episode 159. And remember to check out my mini course, 4 Laws of Learning, at cultofpedagogy.com/laws. Use the code LISTENER at checkout to get $5 off tuition. Thanks so much for listening and have a great day.